Hey everyone, I'm Jonah,
And I'm Connor.
and welcome back to Rank and File Sports. After a 9-4 season that concluded with a bowl win over the Washington Huskies, Louisville might have actually gotten better for the 2025 season, bringing in Miller Moss to fill the quarterback position out of USC. He had a pretty solid season last year, and just overall, Louisville feels like a pretty scary team out of the ACC who is going to have a few teams at the top of the conference, but no clear favorite has really emerged. Couple tricky games on the schedule, though. You got a road trip to Miami on a Friday night, as well as Clemson at home, and another road trip to SMU, who made the college football playoff last season. But eight of these games are going to be at home for the Cardinals, which will be huge, as well as only four on the road, which gives them a schedule difficulty of 3 out of 10.
Starting the season off with their non-conference schedule, facing Eastern Kentucky first. Eastern Kentucky is not gonna have much of a chance in this one. Like, it's Cardinals all day. I can't foresee any scenario where the Cardinals lose this game to open their season. 100% chance for the Cardinals. Following week against James Madison. Now, we saw James Madison beat North Carolina last season in a very high scoring affair. But despite that, I don't think James Madison is going to be at quite the level that Louisville is going to be at next season. Louisville is in a phenomenal place. Obviously, you're bringing in Miller Moss, quarterback, like Jonah was saying at the beginning, who had some ups and downs at USC, but is still a very solid quarterback. And Louisville has a very young running back room, with their leading rusher last season, Isaac Brown, being a freshman and having 1,173 yards on the ground with 11 touchdowns, along with Duke Watson, who was also a freshman with 597 yards with 7 touchdowns. So this Louisville offense is going to be very good. So 95% chance for them to get a win over James Madison going into a very early bye week.
Yeah, after that, one more non-conference game against Bowling Green. Now, Bowling Green did just hire Eddie George to be their head coach after he had a lot of success in the FCS. I do think that despite that, Louisville is just by far the better team, especially at home. They will get a pretty easy win. Then they start ACC play with a road trip to Pitt. This one, obviously, since it's their first really tough test of the year, and the fact that it's on the road, even though we're not super high on this Pitt team, it's going to be only about a 65% chance for Louisville to win. Now, after that, you go back home to face Virginia, and a lot of people have the Cavs as maybe a surprise team this season. I'm not sure if I really see it, but they definitely have the potential to pull off an upset or two. The fact that this one's on the road, though, definitely has us leaning towards the Cardinals at a 70% chance to win. Now, their second bye week is very early. They have to finish the year with seven straight games, the first of which is going to be a road trip to Miami. Obviously, the Hurricanes' biggest story of the offseason was bringing in Carson Beck in the transfer portal. And even though we're not super big on Carson Beck, he's very turnover prone, especially in big situations. I do think this is going to be a solid Miami team, and the home field advantage is going to give them just a slight edge here, only a 40% chance for a Louisville win on the road. Back at home to face Bill O'Brien and Boston College. Another really, really disappointing team last season, but they didn't have a ton of expectations, really. I do think there's going to be a little bit more pressure on O'Brien to build up this Boston College team, maybe to a bowl game this year. It's definitely going to be tough for them to get there, but those are probably going to be the expectations. So, this game being at home for Louisville, we do expect the Cardinals to pick up a win here, about 75% chance. And then finally, a road trip to Virginia Tech. And that one, honestly going to be one of the tougher games of the season. We're pretty high on Virginia Tech this year, and I think the Hokies are, especially with the home field advantage, going to give Louisville a run for their money. We think Louisville's just a little bit more talented than Virginia Tech, which is why we're going to give them a slight edge here on the road, but definitely not out of the question that Louisville could lose this game.
Following that, they will face the Cal Golden Bears, a very tough road trip for the Golden Bears, but they should be a solid matchup for this Cardinals team. Kind of similarly, they've built a very solid team using the transfer portal. They have Devin Brown coming in at quarterback from Ohio State, along with a very highly touted recruit in Jaren Koe Sagapulotele. I'm sorry, I botched that name, but I believe he's actually expected to be the starter, but Devin Brown does have a good amount of experience and was at a very successful program at Ohio State. So that'll be an interesting QB battle to watch during the spring and over the summer. But the big focal point of Cal's offense will be Jaden Ott returning at running back and is going to be a very solid option for this California team. But I do think Louisville will have the edge in this one because it's at home. That is a tough road trip for Cal to come all the way from the Pacific Coast to the Atlantic Coast, like I was saying earlier, giving Louisville a 70% chance to get a win here against a very good Cal team that was in our way too early top 25, I might add. Following week, they will face probably their toughest test of the season, going up against the Clemson Tigers. Cade Klubnik is returning at quarterback, and Dabo has finally started to use the transfer portal and is building a team that is looking to compete for a national championship this season. This Clemson team is going to be scary next year and might be my early pick as like a dark horse team to win the college football national championship next year. But this Louisville team, we saw they were able to compete with some very good teams. It's going to be interesting to see how Miller Moss performs in Louisville's system, especially considering that a lot of Louisville's receivers were seniors. And I tried to look at them and if they're going to the draft and graduating or if they're staying. For the most part, it looks like they're losing a good amount of them. And at the very least, their leading receiver in Ja'Cory Brooks after a 1,000-yard season. But they do still have Chris Bell, who had a very solid season as their wide receiver too. So he's going to be the primary option for Miller Moss in this offense. So I think Louisville can keep this one close, especially with it being at home, looking for a signature win. But we're going to lean the Tigers in this one, giving Louisville a 30% chance to get a signature win here. Following week, they will go on the road to place probably their second toughest game of the season in Kevin Jennings and the SMU Mustangs after their college football playoff appearance. Similarly, this should be a very interesting game. I think it'll be a little bit closer than the Clemson game just because we saw that SMU is a very vulnerable team. We saw in that Penn State game they didn't stand a chance. Granted, Penn State's defense was significantly better than many of the other defenses in college football. So I do think Louisville has a slightly better chance in this one, even though it is on the road. But I do think home field advantage will be the difference maker in this one. So we're leaning SMU in this one once again, giving Louisville a 40% chance to get the win on the road here. Then it's the in-state rivalry game against the Kentucky Wildcats. Kentucky is not a very good team. They were second to last in the SEC last season, only ahead of Mississippi State, who I believe only won maybe one conference game, and if even any. So I don't think this Kentucky team is getting very much better. They did get that win over Ole Miss on the road, but I do think this Louisville team is going to be scary next season. I think at this point, any kinks Miller Moss had to work out during the regular season will be fixed, and this Cardinals team will get a solid win at home to finish off their season, giving them a 75% chance to finish it off with a win.
Yeah, overall, this schedule is honestly not looking too terrible for Louisville if they want to make a run at the ACC title. Obviously, the three big games, Miami, Clemson, and SMU. Aside from that, maybe they lose one or two other games. I could also see them pulling off an upset somewhere. So I'm thinking probably 8-4 realistically, but they could even get to 9-3 or 10-2 if they have a really solid season.
Yeah, I think 8-4 is maybe where they'll end up. I might be leaning more 9-3 or honestly even 10-2. I think this team, even though it'd be on the road against Miami, I think this team could beat Miami and have maybe their only two losses come against Clemson and SMU. But I'm really high on this Louisville team. It is fully dependent on how Miller Moss adapts to this Cardinals system. But if he's able to progress and be that highly recruited quarterback that he was, that we saw flashes of at USC, I think this Louisville team could be playing for the ACC championship, especially if they get wins over teams like Miami and SMU on the road. They could easily end up playing Clemson in the ACC championship game. But I think 8-4 is safe for right now just because we have some doubts about Miller Moss. We saw that he had some ups and downs at USC. So I think 8-4 is good for right now.
Yeah, and 8-4 is going to be our way too early projections. But keep in mind, these are not our final predictions for the 2025 season. We'll do another video for every single team where we'll actually predict each game, game by game, and give you what we think their record's going to be. So maybe we'll up it a little bit. I'd say there's definitely a better chance of that happening than dropping it all from 8-4. I think 8-4 is honestly looking like a floor for Louisville, in my opinion. 7-5 would maybe be the worst case scenario. But anyways, last year they went 9-4. Like I said, getting that bowl win over Washington. Our projected win totals actually 8.1 wins, which is very solid for this Louisville team. The over/under is sitting at 8.5, favored for the over. So Vegas is also liking them to go 9-3. Very possible. I'd say Louisville's probably one of the most likely teams to get a little bit of a boost to their record prediction over the summer. But for right now, we're going to stick with 8-4 as our prediction for the Louisville Cardinals. So thank you guys for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in our next video.